sense.
I would hate for Shan'ann to get a bad rap if she didn't have anything to do with it. You know, it's not fair.
I know.
It's not fair. Like, enough bad stuff has happened.
I know.
Like, we need to stop the bad stuff from happening. So, do you want to tell us the truth?
That is the truth. Did not hurt this girl.
That's why I want to make sure.
Did not hurt this girl.
So you're good with the public knowing that Shan'ann killed her daughters?
I did not hurt these girls.
Are you okay with the public knowing that Shan'ann?
Yes, because I did not hurt these girls. Grace, I'm not sure I believe you.
I don't think you meant to.
I didn't hurt them.
I don't think you meant to.
I didn't hurt them.
You didn't save them either. You know?
I know that. I know that.
So that doesn't make sense either.
None of this makes sense. Nothing like why she would be there. Any none of this makes sense.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. In this episode, the focus is going to be on continuing to address the myth that Nicole Kessinger was there, in inverted commas. I was interested to see the commentary and the responses to the YouTube video I posted on Nikki Was There, Debunked. Especially to see the reasons that people gave that proved, in inverted commas, that Kessinger was supposedly in the Watts home. Some of the things I hadn't seen before, or I certainly hadn't seen it before in the context in which they were put. And one of them was this statement that Watts made, which I've just provided the context for. Interestingly, quite a few people would bring it up, the statement that he made, but then they couldn't really say where they'd heard it or where it specifically came from in the interrogation. And so they've taken this one snippet where Watts says the words, you know, why she would be there, right? And this is then sort of magically conjured into, this is a reference to Nicole Kessinger. And again, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see, if you're watching the clip in context, it's all about the fact that Watts has already confessed to murdering Shan'ann, but is sort of blamed Shan'ann for killing the children, and the interrogators have now moved the narrative sort of forward to say, well, we don't actually believe the second part of that. We don't believe that Shan'ann did that. And CBI agent Tammy Lee especially seems quite sort of emotional and quite invested, and she sort of says to him, you know, you can't, you know, if she didn't do it, you really can't mislead the public in this way. And then Watts sort of gets actually quite angry. You can kind of hear his voice raising a pitch and him getting quite agitated, and he's effectively trying to shut Tammy Lee down, trying to stop her from repeatedly asking him, you know, what really happened. but it's all about Shan'ann. It's we don't believe that Shan'ann did this. We don't think Shan'ann was involved, right? And then what's eventually addresses the point when Coda says to him, doesn't make any sense. What sort of reacts, and he says, well, none of it makes sense. Why she would be there. And he's talking about Shan'ann. He's talking about this sort of mythical scenario where Shan'ann is doing what she was doing. Why she would be there doing what she was doing. In any situation where people are talking about someone, and then you then refer to them through a pronoun like he or she, whatever, then that refers obviously to the person that you've been talking about all along, especially if it's one person, not several. And in this case, only one person is being addressed throughout, right? I also want to bring up another aspect, which is so again, a lot of people have said that this is a Freudian slip, and what Watts was really trying to say there is that he sort of misspoke, and he was like, oh, Nicole Kessinger was there. It's really abundantly obvious that that's not the case, and anyone who's making that case is relying either on the ignorance of people to sort of hear this claim, have it repeated, and then someone who comes into the game late, who doesn't know about the context, then says, oh really, did he say that? And they already have they're already primed to believe that Kessinger was involved in some way, and so this then provides them with ammunition. But it's, you're shooting blanks. It's not ammunition. It's in many ways this is exactly like the shadow. It's a little snippet taken completely out of context and then blown up to become something supposedly tangible. In the case of the shadow, people sort of confidently make the claim that yes, they can see a child. In fact, what they are seeing is a tiny fragment in the screen, and in that tiny fragment, at one moment, I'm not sure how long it is it 20 minutes, about 20 minutes of footage, there's one moment where there's a little line that occurs on the driveway, and it's counterintuitive, for the lack of a better word. And because it's this unidentified shadow object, a USO, it suddenly becomes whatever you want it to be. And in this case, it becomes a child running around, and now someone becomes famous because they've seen something. The fact is, with that shadow, you don't see shoes, you don't see hair, you don't see clothing, you don't see a person, you don't see any other sort of artifact of that person anywhere else. You don't see any other symptom of them. You see Chris Watts walking to and fro quite a few times. You see his shadow moving, you see him moving in and out. At no point you see any other person. I do remember there was another sort of claim that someone was walking around with white shoes, and this definitely wasn't Chris Watts, it was someone else. That was also taken completely out of context, where the moment Chris Watts stepped into the light under the garage, the light spooling on his boots sort of kind of bleached them and sort of overexposed his footwear, making them appear white. And so what somebody did was they took that completely out of context, and this isn't by mistake. This isn't someone who is watching the coverage and kind of sees something and legitimately thinks they're seeing something legitimate. It's someone who's looking for little allegories and little things that can be misinterpreted and can be used to misdirect people, and then make interesting little stories about it. And make no mistake, you've got people who are incentivized to do that. They make money by catching you and hooking you in the latest little sort of loop-de-loop, wild goose chase, becomes a dead end, then on to the next one kind of thing. What's fascinating with the current state of the YouTubers discussing this is that there's sort of jumping ship, and also I think for the first time everyone seems to be kind of attacking or criticizing everyone else. And my criticism isn't to anyone, it is to the whole approach, which is we're not discussing the case anymore, we're discussing each other, and we're discussing almost sort of beliefs. Well, I believe that Shadow was a child, or whatever. There's so much to discuss in terms of the case itself. There's so much psychology that is revealed in the case itself. There's so much to discuss that is rooted in the discovery, including the very extensive 1,960 pages, the original discovery. There's so much there, and yet people have left that far behind, and they are now kind of in another world. And Armchair Detective describes it as Watts Island or something like that. I quite appreciate his perspective on everybody else, but it's nevertheless a situation, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a situation where somebody has gotten access to Chris Watts and written a book, and this book is suddenly, it's gotten over 100 reviews already, I think. So it's certainly the talk of the town, and it's popular, and it's getting people's attention. Not getting the media's attention, but we're certainly getting a lot of traction. And then what you're getting with the YouTubers is you're getting a kind of a food fight over who gets to talk to this author, who gets to sort of get onto the gravy train. And some have been part of that, and some have been cut out of that. What I find a little bit laughable, though, is the bottom line, which is it doesn't matter who talks to Chris Watts, you're still going to get deceit. But that doesn't seem to matter. It doesn't seem to matter whether what he's saying isn't true. What seems to matter is that somebody gets the scoop, kind of thing, the scoop of the thing that's not true. And that's what I find a bit, I'm a bit cynical about that, and I find it in poor form, not only from the folks that are sort of wouldn't say the thought leaders, but certainly the main commentators of this case. People have asked me, if I don't want to interview Chris Watts and all that kind of thing, and my answer is no. So in other words, if someone said, would you want to go and talk to him, if he made some kind of declaration where he said, he's finally decided, he really wants God to forgive him, and he realizes he's got to be completely honest, I still wouldn't believe that, but that would at least be some kind of commitment to something new. The bottom line, though, is no matter who talks to him, you're going to get something bogus, and that's not idiosyncratic to Chris Watts. That's not a special scenario with him. It's no matter who you're dealing with in a situation where they are clearly guilty and where they are trying to wriggle out of accountability, they are going to try and find a way to minimize what they've done. They are going to try and find a way to sort of twist things and manipulate things and influence and whatever to kind of get the upper hand or make things better for themselves. So no matter how you slice it, and certainly no matter who slices it for you, no matter who Watts takes into his confidence, who he talks to, you're still going to get crap, right? It doesn't matter whether it's Coder talking to him, or Lee, or Cadel, or Detective Baumhover, or Coonrod, or Nicole Atkinson, or Sandy Rusek, or what he was saying to Shan'ann when she was still alive in those texts. It also doesn't matter what he was kind of saying to Nicole Kessinger. He was lying to everybody, right? So whether you want to go and talk to him or I do, or you're still going to get crap. And the trick here isn't who goes to talk to him, even though I'm sure that person's going to get some attention. The real trick is, what is he misdirecting you away from what really happened? And is there any little fraction of what he's saying that's true? And that to me is the interesting part of this. That's the true crime rocket science. That's where you really trying to fathom what happened. That's the part that's getting interesting. The part that's not interesting to me is the sort of endless little loop-de-loops where we talk about this or that. The latest is now that I think Shan'ann is supposedly was abusive to her children or something, and now that's now something people want to rage about, either to attack the people saying it or to defend the idea of it. It's just the latest in a bunch of nonsense narratives. The proper way to do this is to stick to Chris Watts, not to talk about the people talking about him or any of that. And that's what differentiates True Crime Rocket Science from everybody else. And I'm telling you guys this to let those people know, who care about this case, who are trying to figure it out. Well, this is the way to figure it out. And I'm going to illustrate that with a little example. Obviously the books I've written have got a lot more of that kind of meat and potatoes. But there's an obvious misconception, I think, with by far the majority of people following this case, including the media, which is that Chris Watts smothered his children, that the children died because they were smothered or strangled, right? How do we know? Because the autopsy tells us that. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. There's no muss or fuss. It's very clear that that's what's going on. Unfortunately, this kind of shallow, superficial thinking permeates the Chris Watts case. A lot of the people talking about it think in these shallow levels, and they're not thinking critically. Even when they think they're not thinking critically. And how you think critically, for example, is you go and look at the exact words of the autopsy report, and you'll see in all three instances, Shan'ann, Bella and Cece, you see the coroner refers specifically to the history given, and that this leads to the cause of death being smothering in the children's cases. So based on the history that is gotten, in other words, not based on forensic evidence, not based on bruises or marks on the body or injuries, but based on history. And what that history refers to is what the suspect said. And what did the suspect say? He said, "I smothered them." And how did the suspect say that? Well, it came from basically the interrogators in the beginning suggesting that, did Shan'ann do something? That's how it started. Did Shan'ann do something? Did Shan'ann smother them? Did Shan'ann, right, that's how it started. And then when Watts eventually confesses, and again this is inverted commas, he takes that scenario of smothering, and that then becomes what the coroner refers to in circular reasoning. And this is where true crime rocket science comes into it, is you say, was it smothering? Like, what evidence, other than what Chris Watts said, and what the coroner said Chris Watts said, and all that, other than that circular reasoning, what is likely? What is going on here? And there are a couple of things you can look at. You can look at the fact that there was no screaming, no noises made, no dog barking in the middle of the night. That's sort of the lighter version of that whole thing. But there's another sort of more obvious aspect to it, which you really get to in the first confession, not so much in the others. But this takes concentration, focus, and critical thinking. So before we get to that, are you prepared to take the step? Are you prepared to concentrate and just for a few moments, just suspend everything you know about the Watts case, all the all the cacophony that has sort of been floating around? Are you prepared to suspend that just temporarily? Just suspend your belief or your disbelief for 5 minutes and consider another view. You can consider it and disagree with it, but are you prepared to at least open your mind and consider it? Use your intelligence, use your sensibility, use your logic, use your intuition, use your experience with the way people talk, the way people work, the psychology of people, right? So this is how it goes. In this first scenario, you have Chris Watts explaining how he sort of speaks to Shan'ann early in the morning, and he then leaves her and he goes sort of downstairs. Now, in the scenario, he's told it, which I don't believe is true, but he tells her that he wants the separation and he wants to move to another home. Then he leaves her and he heads downstairs, I guess to make a protein shake or something. While he's away, while he's out of the room, while he's in transit, while he's somewhere else, Shan'ann strangles Bella. Again, this is the first confession. And Watts then sort of is distracted or alerted by something which causes him to turn around. We don't know where. We don't know whether he turns around in the kitchen or on the stairs, but he turns around and then he heads back upstairs to find Shan'ann busy strangling Cece, right? And what's basically, this is in the warrantless arrest affidavit, Watts interrupts her in this thing. So she's on top of Cece, strangling her, and presumably she's just completed that. She's just completed that action, that activity, that execution, that assassination, the murder. And what does Watts do? He sort of seems to pull her off or move her aside, and then he strangles Shan'ann. Now, what's wrong with this story? If you don't think about it, it's just simply, it's simply Shan'ann kills the two children and Watts responds and does what he does. But if you think of it intuitively and you think of it that each strangling must take 3 to 5 minutes, then you have a situation where that's how long it took to strangle Bella, and that's what's needed to be in this scenario, which we know isn't true. We'll get to the truth of it, and we'll get to how we fathom the truth from knowing what's not true. But in this fictional scenario, you've got to have 3 to 5 minutes where Watts is somewhere else in the house early in the morning, while Shan'ann is now strangling Bella, right? Then there's another 3 to 5 minutes. Now it's 6 to 10 minutes where Watts must be somewhere else early in the morning after he's had this conversation, and now Shan'ann is strangling Cece. Now in this situation, Cece wasn't woken up by the sound, the muffled noise of Bella being strangled. Bella sort of shouting into Shanann's hand or into the sheet or whatever it is, the pillow, right? Nobody heard anything in this situation. Again, I'm not saying any of this is true. All I'm saying is look at where this takes us when we follow it intuitively. When Watts catches Shan'ann as she completes the strangling of Cece, he then strangles Shan'ann, right? That's not what would have happened if Watts really had strangled anybody, because he would have known how long it would have taken, the noises that would have been made, the fighting back. But there's another aspect, and that is, and this only comes through again if you study the interrogation in some detail. You also hear it in this little clip that I provided here, is the interrogators ask him, why didn't you save them? Why didn't you try to save your children? And Watts doesn't understand. And what they mean is, your children have just been strangled, right? Cece has literally been strangled moments before Watts enters the room. And his first thing that he does isn't to try to come to her aid. He doesn't even know for sure that Cece's dead when he starts to attack Shan'ann. This is in this fictional scenario. But what it's getting at is the agents are asking him, did you do what any other parent would do? Did you notice what was going on with the children? Did you render aid? Did you call 911? Did you try and do CPR? And we know Chris Watts did a CPR course at his work. That's also in the discovery. Did you try to do anything to help your children? And the answer is no. And Watts seems almost mystified by this. It just seems to be strange and irrelevant, and it's almost like, I don't know what you're talking about, I don't know what you're getting at. They were dead. And part of how he explains it, and I've gone into some detail about this in Silver Fox, but part of how he explains it is he says, well, they were blue. And this is where he gives away how they really died, and also how they didn't die. In the scenario, again, this fictional scenario where he catches Shan'ann, there's no way that Cece would immediately turn blue. When someone is strangled, they immediately, there's an effort involved in fighting back, there's an effort involved in the struggle for life and so on. And so there's that look of exhaustion and struggle. Someone might have a really, really red face, almost like from exertion, from running or sprinting, and then gradually the blood will then drain from the face gradually, after that, and it will go from red to the normal color to pallor, and then after several minutes to a white sort of color, and then not necessarily blue, just a very, very pale color. Blue tends to be associated with overdose, with a gradual shutting down of the organs. And so in other words, in this fictional scenario, what Watts reveals is that he doesn't know what a strangling looks like, sounds like, how long it takes, or anything to do with the injuries. But especially doesn't know about the appearance of the victim afterwards. Do you guys see that? And you only get to that point when you take the actual discovery and you interrogate it on its own merits, and you go into it quite deeply, right? And what's missing in this case is that kind of thing. There's just so much superficial chatter going on about nonsense. And I want to just attend to that very briefly. All this true crime cherry picking. A statement, a snippet plucked out of the ether, randomly and out of context, like why she would be there, doesn't equal Nicole Kessinger was there. It's not the same thing. Most people who are taken to the context and who listens to that would know that. People have accused me of being anti-Shan'ann. I'm not a supporter of multi-level marketing. I'm saddened by people who are, because I see a very dark road ahead of them. I see a lot of struggle ending in almost inevitable failure. I've seen that with people I know. I've seen it elsewhere. I've also, I've done my due diligence, I've done my research. And so people who are sort of dogmatic about multi-level marketing, I sort of have pity for, and I probably don't have as much respect for someone as for someone who says, look, this is clearly a scam. It hasn't worked. It's never going to work, and people are being duped. And the people who are being duped, their job is to dupe other people, right? So if I'm not a supporter of multi-level marketing, doesn't mean I'm anti-Shan'ann. And if so those shouldn't be misconstrued. Also, if Kissinger is not an accessory, that doesn't mean True Crime Rocket Science is connected to Nicole Kissinger. For goodness sake, I'm not even in America. So, Kissinger not being an accessory is about thinking about the case. So just because you have a particular view doesn't mean you're in team Kissinger or team Shan'ann or whatever. True Crime Rocket Science doesn't have a team. There is no team, right? It's also not being Team Watts or even part of the people who are with either of the families. The whole point of True Crime Rocket Science is to be completely independent and to just get to the truth. That's the thing. There's no alliance, no allegiance, no bias. At least we're trying not to be biased. So if you can make a good case that there is bias, then that's something to remedy, one way or the other. A shadow does not equal a child. A whisper and a shadow does not equal evidence that can be admitted in court. And in the same way, a UFO isn't proof that we are not alone in the universe. A UFO is a UFO. A UFO is something that hasn't been identified, and we're not sure what it is. Proof that we are not alone in the universe is when someone knocks on your door, says in some kind of alien language, whatever, and asks you to take them, him, whatever, to your leader. That's proof. That's something that's real. But something that you thought you saw isn't proof. Believing in something strongly does not equal a fact. Being very emotional that something is true is not a fact. And these are all kindergarten aspects of true crime that is worryingly absent in the Chris Watts case. So I want to encourage the sensible minority among you to detach from the nonsense and to call out the people for their nonsense, because it is becoming a circus. And aren't we better than this? Aren't we better? Aren't we smarter than this? Are we incapable of having sensible, informed, intelligent conversations? I recently saw a clip from a YouTuber talking about Shan'ann's income, and Shan'ann's income being, I think, $62,000 or something. And this research was apparently based on this guy talking to 6, I think, multi-level marketers. Do you honestly think you're going to get an honest answer from them? I mean, they are in it to sucker other people to get into it, so they're going to sell a good story. Also, shouldn't you be getting the income that Shan'ann got from someone who was higher than her, or someone who was whatever? But there's another way to look at that whole debate about Shan'ann's income. Number one, nobody knows what her income actually was because we don't have the bank statements. That's the bottom line. the end game of that whole conversation is Shan'ann had no money. Their credit cards were maxed out. They were about to lose their home, right? So that's the end game of that whole conversation. So if you're going to make the claim that Shan'ann was earning just as good a salary as her husband, then where is the debt coming from? Is it something you want to conjure out of thin air? And this is the part that I find really weird. You have a situation like this, you have a family annihilation, you have serious financial problems, and people want to insist, without any evidence, they want to insist that Shan'ann's income was completely normal. With everything we know about multi-level marketing, everything we know statistically, people still want to make the case that, wow, this is actually someone who's a very successful multi-level marketer. Really? Is that why there were all these problems? And a really interesting discussion is the capacity to which people involved in multi-level marketing are deluded to think that they can afford things that they can't afford, deluded to think that they have access to a lifestyle that they actually don't have access to. Another aspect that this guy mentioned was something about the car, the luxury car that supposedly Lavelle paid half for, or something like that. I don't know where he's doing his research, but the bottom line with that is the car is kind of, it's like a rental, except it's not quite a rental. It's like hire purchase, and the moment the promoter misses their targets, they're on their own. Then Lavelle doesn't pay their share, and Lavelle is counting on that. Lavelle is counting on them not being able to meet these incredible targets, and counting on the greed of the promoter to want a car that they can't afford, right? And if you really want to go into it, if you really want to understand the finances from a gut feel point of view, imagine it's not Thrive. Imagine it's candy bars. Imagine it's chocolate bars that you are selling to somebody else and expecting to be able to pay for a car based on how many chocolate bars you're selling. That's really what it comes down to. It's not selling insurance policies or like a proper job. It's selling overpriced chocolate bars to other people who are also selling overpriced chocolate bars, and getting as many people to be part of your chocolate bar team, right? And then saying you're going to make a living selling chocolate bars to one another, and how chocolate bars have changed your life because they just made you realize how sweet being alive can be, and how happy you are and how happy your family are. That's really what it is. And this idea that you're going to make money buying chocolate bars and then selling them, it's not even that someone gives them to you. You buy them and you hoard them in your basement, and then you try and resell them, and what you eventually find is eventually everyone in your community's got the same thing. And really this idea that you're going to make enough money selling chocolate bars to that it's actually going to pay off a car, that is the absolute epitome of delusion. But the worrying thing is that the delusion we see in the Watts case, and with the people involved, not just Chris Watts but Shan'ann to an extent, not just Shan'ann but the other promoters, we see with other people involved in true crime who are looking at this case and they just see what they want to see. It's a worrying thing. It's a kind of like a mental illness, and the antidote is true crime rocket science. So who's with me?
But understand that at this point, I still can't answer questions about the facts surrounding the investigation.
Really all everyone wanted throughout was justice for Shan'ann and Bella and Celeste. We're certainly pleased this seems to be the outcome.
I think all of those who were involved never truly believed that he would give us an accurate statement. What I can tell you most affirmatively today by what happened in the courtroom is the spotlight that he tried to shine on Shan'ann falsely, incorrectly, and frankly a flat-out lie. It is the spotlight that keep trying to shine on Shan'ann falsely, incorrectly, frankly, flat out lie.
I didn't know what else to do.
And he's so disgusting. I'm so ashamed of him. Why? Oh, why? How? I don't even understand how you could bring yourself to do that to somebody who's like,
It was a shocking deal news of the week. Occidental increasing its bid for Anadarko to $76 a share.